Hey guys, thanks for joining me again. Today in this video we are going to be going over more command line stuff, and it's file permissions and file ownership. So the first thing we need to do in order to discuss this is to have a file that we currently don't have any permissions to. And the easiest way to do that is to type sudo nano file. What this is going to do is, as an administrator or as the root user, it's going to use nano to produce a file named file. I'm going to put .txt there so we can keep track of it. And I'm going to type read and Control O to save, hit enter and Control X. Now if I type ls-l, we see here that file.txt is owned by the user root and that user's group root. Now, what we've got here are permissions, and the way these columns work is this is for the owner. The owner can read and write. Groups can only read, and public can only read. So if I want to make myself able to read and write, I've got to change this third column to match that column. And I've actually got to first share it with the group nick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a second command here called sudo chown. And this means change ownership of a file. And then how we write this is we type the user group. So user corresponds to what we're setting this column to. Group corresponds to what we're setting this column to. So I'm going to leave it as root for the user that owns it and share it with the group nick, and then the file that we want to perform this action on. Now if I type lsl, we should see here that txt now is under ownership of the nick group. So we need to change this third column to write. So how we do that is use chmod, and we're going to use that as sudo to change the permissions of the file. Now 6 means it is readable and writable. 4 means it is readable, and 7 means it's a directory. We don't use that typically with single files, and we'll go over that more in a moment. So we're going to set, if I typed out the permissions in numeric values that it currently has, it would look like that. So we can see that 4 corresponds to read access, 6 corresponds to read-write access. So what we want to do to change the third column here is we're going to type sudo chmod 646 and then the file that we want to perform this action on. Now if I type ls-l, we can see that change has been made. So I can now use nano on file.txt, and I should be able to write to it, and I can't. That's because the columns, I changed the wrong column. We needed to change the second column. So I'm going to type sudo chmod 664 on file.txt. What this has done, the first 2 columns are now read, write, and the third column is just read. So now I can write to that file. So that's neat, but let's say I want to own that file. Let's say that file was created under administrative privileges, but I want to own it forever. So I'm going to type sudo chown nick, and the file that I want to perform that on is that. Let's say I want to switch the permissions back to 644. I will retain ownership, so I'll be able to write to it, as the first column has read-write access for Nick, and that's me. So I no longer need this group column there as well. So what I'm going to type is sudo chmod 644 file.txt. If I run ls again, I can see that the permissions have been changed back so that only the owner of the file can write to it. Cool. Now I'm going to delete that file because I don't need it. So to delete a single file, all you'll do is type rm and then the file name. And if I list again, we do not have a file.txt. Let's create a directory. And I'm going to create it as administrator. So sudo mkdir, which means make directory, and I'm going to name it my dir. And we can see here that my directory has been created. And we can see the permissions on this. It's owned by root. Now, what this means is it's readable, writable, and executable. This means that anybody else can read and execute it. So I can change directory into my dir. This is executing it. So I've just allowed myself to execute that, and that allows me to go into it. Now, let's say I wanted to go back up a directory and use this. Let's create a file actually in that directory. So I'm going to type sudo nano file.txt. Actually, I got to put that in my dir. And the way we do that, again, we specify in the current directory, find my dir, and create it in there, and hit enter. Now, if I ls my dir, I see that I have a file in there. If I type ls-l, I can see that the file in there is also owned by the root. Let's make another file. So I'm going to run the previous command, and in terminal you can hit the up key and you can keep hitting it, and it's going to go up from previous commands that you've entered. So I see there's two files in that directory that I want to own. As we can see right now, both files are owned by root because I've created them using the super user account. Now, what we're going to do here is a form of the change ownership binary file or command. And how we're going to do that is type sudo chown, and we're going to pass it this argument $R, which means it's recursive. Every file in this directory is going to become under the ownership of Nick. So to give a little bit about this command that we're running, because it might look confusing because there are multiple parts to it, we're running it as sudo because we currently don't have permissions to this directory because it's owned in by the root user and group, and we have no write access, so we can't change it. So we're running this command as sudo. Chown stands for change ownership. That's the program that we're running. We're passing it this argument $R to make the command recursive. If I didn't have this in this command, if it looked like this, this would change the ownership of the directory to Nick, but not the files in it. So capital R as an argument there, and then the user and the group that we want to assign ownership to, and then the file or directory that we are going to perform that action on. So when I hit enter and then type LSL, we see now that I've got ownership of this directory. And if I type ls-l on my directory, we can see I've also got ownership on all of the files within that directory. So to recap, we use chown to change ownership of a file. We use chmod to change the permissions of the file. Both of these can be recursive by adding -r to the command. Then we define the specifics of the change we're making. So with chmod, it's going to be 755 or 757 or 777. This is just a bad idea if you're running a server. Never make any directories ownership 777. Files are 1 digit less, so 666 would be full modification ability for anybody on a file. We would never do that. 664 means the owner of the file and the group of the file have read-write access, and the public has read access. And 644 means owner has read-write, group has read, and public has read. Now, if we're using the chown command, it's going to be in the format user group. And this is going to change the ownership of whatever file we give it to that. And then the last part of each of these two commands is the file or directory that we want to have this effect on. So if I type user share, this is going to give my user all the files in this directory are going to become under the ownership of my user and my group. Be careful when you run that, because some files need to be owned by root in order to work. Typically, you're not going to be working too much outside of your home directory, but we're going to get there. There are some files you're going to need to change, especially when we set up Apache as the web server and whatnot. So thanks for watching this video. I hope it's been informative. I'll see you guys in the next video. Let's create some new files. So to create a new file, I'm going to change directory into mydir, just because it's going to be quicker to write commands. And touch is going to create files. So if you just want to create a file without like in one of the previous videos, I showed you how to type nano and then the name of the file, and if the file didn't exist, it would open it and create a new one. But if you just want to stay in terminal and don't want to go into a text editor, you just want to create files, you'd use touch followed by the file name. So touch, and we're going to create main.cpp. So in the previous command, let me clear this there. So in the previous command, we learned how to use the asterisk. So if I were to remove this would remove everything that has the CPP extension. Let's say I actually wanted to remove everything but leave the directory intact. We would type this. So let's get out of this directory, and I'll show you how it looks from the outside. So if I wanted to remove everything but my dir, but leave my dir existing, it would be written like this. If I run that and then run ls on my dir, we see it is empty. It doesn't have anything in it. So now we can remove my dir. Oh, right, sorry. rm-rf mydir. So you need to use the -rf to remove a directory. And there, we're back exactly where we started. So to recap on a few commands here, and I'm just going to type them out. CP is copy. The first argument it takes is the file, and the second argument it takes is where you're putting it and what file name. So that's how to copy files. How to remove files, you just type rm and then the file name. Now let's say this is in a directory. You can still remove it. You just type the position of the file. Then if you want to remove all file.anythings, you do this. If you want to remove all text files, you do this. If you want to remove every file from a directory, you just do this. It's going to remove everything from that directory and leave the directory. If you want to remove the directory as well as everything in it, you would run this command. And this is remove rf and then the directory name. Now if you want to move a file, it's just like copy, except it doesn't leave a copy where it started. So file name and then where you're copying it to. Let's say you just want to copy it to the same directory with a different name. You would do this. And we also learned the touch command. So this, you can create files and stay in terminal. So that's a neat command. So thanks for watching. What I want you guys to do before you watch the next video, I want you guys to get used to moving around in terminal. So use the commands that we've learned up to this point, excluding the package commands. Just use ls and cd and move around the file system and go explore a bit. Don't change permissions on any files you're not aware of, and don't change the ownership of them. So really I'd recommend staying in the home directory at this point. Just create some directories and move around in them, create files, move files, copy files, and get used to using terminal in this way. It's going to make future videos a lot easier because I'm not going to go as slowly on them, and so I want you guys to be able to follow. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. In this video we're going to be covering a few more utility commands, and then we're going to move on to more advanced stuff. So we already know how to use the following commands. And also switch user. These are utility commands. I'm not gonna throw the repository commands and package installation commands in here. These are the utility commands that we can currently use, and this gives us the ability to move around the file system in the terminal, to print things out, to modify some things in terms of file permissions, but we have a few more things to do. So let's start by listing this directory's contents. So let's look at the a.out file. Let's say I want to move that. I just want to move it somewhere. So how we do that is we will first create a folder. And so this is the first command we're going to learn here. It's mkdir. And this is an abbreviation for make directory. It's going to be followed by the directory that we want to create. So again, we can use an absolute position. If I wanted to put it user bin and then my directory, this would create an absolutely positioned directory. We can go one level up or 2 levels up and then create the directory. Or we can just say in the current directory, create new directory. Then if I run ls again, we can see new directory right here. So let's move a.out into new directory. So to do this, you're going to type mv and this is an abbreviation for move, a.out space new directory / a.out. And what this is going to do is it's going to take this file, which is found in the current directory, move it into new directory / the same name, and we do need to provide the name, and then hit enter. Now if we run ls again, we see that a.out is no longer in the home directory, but if we run ls on the new directory, we can see it's in there. So that's how to move files. Now let's say we want to copy it somewhere else. So I have a directory that I created in a previous video called my.dir. Let's rename that. So to rename it, you use the mv command. Then if I run ls again, we're going to see we no longer have a my.dir, but we have a my second directory. So let's copy the a.out file from new directory into my second directory. And how we do this is with a command called cp, which is an abbreviation for copy. And the first argument we're going to give it is what file we want to work with, and then the second argument is going to be where we want to copy it to. So new directory / a.out, and then my second directory a.out, and hit enter. Now if we run ls on my second directory, we get this. We've got file and file2 from the previous videos, but now we've also got a.out. And if we list the new directory, we also have a.out. So now we've got two copies of that file, which is awesome.